The Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, wrote an article in The Australian today defending his many overseas trips. He argues that what happens in the world matters at home and that he's made it a priority for Australia to have a seat at the world table. But while he's away, who is leading the country? Who's stepping up to tackle rising inflation, the housing crisis, and address the anti-Semitism that we're seeing explode in our communities? Joining me now is National Senate Leader Bridget McKenzie and former federal Labor MP Michael Danby. Welcome to you both. Bridget, do you think Anthony Albanese is hiding here in the wake of the defeat of the Voice referendum and other difficult issues?
Yeah, thanks, Shari. I think you outlined it really well in your opening comments. I mean, this is the 17th country in 18 months that our Prime Minister's visiting when there are real issues here at home. He's cancelled sitting week last week for the House of Reps. He's minimising the level of scrutiny his government is subjected to during the parliamentary process. And it's almost Whitlam-esque, this guy's attraction to the trappings of power as he scoots around in his, VIP and flies his dog here and there, etc. And I think it really, when Australians are doing it tough, energy prices 18%, food 8%, your average mortgage families have to find another 22 grand a year in the wake of these issues. And this government just doesn't have a plan to actually deal with the very real problems that people are experiencing at home. And I know we're going to talk about this later on in this segment, but you mentioned the anti-Semitism. I mean, we have Australians here in this country feeling incredibly unsafe, and they don't have a Prime Minister who cares enough to actually be at home and make these public statements that need to be said so that state, particularly police forces, but state leaders also come out in support of our Jewish community.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. I don't want to take up time speaking, but this is a crisis of anti-Semitism. It's the worst since the wake of World War II, and the Prime Minister hasn't stood up and given a speech and shown leadership on it.
Correct.
Michael, the reason I wanted you on tonight, Michael Danby, you're a long-time Labor politician in federal parliament, in the Labor Party. You were part of the Labor right faction. What we're seeing now is the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister who come from the left faction. What do you think about how they're handling this war in Israel? How do you compare the comments that they've made compared to that beautiful statement from our 6 former Prime Ministers?
Exactly. And even the Premier of New South Wales, and Beazley and Crean and Shorten and any of the previous leaders of the Labor right that would have been there in the past. There's no empathy. Cold, passionless Penny Wong with her false equivalence of the Israelis are murdering people. I mean, they are in a military fight under the laws of war. It's not murder. Being incited by the ABC. Look, the whole lack of sympathy and non-understanding of this is going to get worse and worse. I'm very afraid of the warning that the Director General of ASIO gave us that there could be opportunistic or spontaneous violence. And the Prime Minister, when he's back from China, or to quieten this down, Ed Husic should have told off that lunatic preacher and his electorate that inciting people on the day of the murders. Political leadership is now. There'll be violence all over the world, as we saw in Dagestan where there was that pogrom. Unless the police exercise power on behalf of the Australian state, these jihadists feel empowered. Hamas is here, Hezbollah is here. We see them outside Richard Marles's office, outside Peter Khalil's office, dominating Collins Place, yelling out "Gas the Jews" outside our iconic Sydney Opera House. My goodness, what a situation.
I completely agree. Thank you for the strong words, Michael Danby. Thank you for, as a former Labor politician, standing up for the Jewish community. It's a pity we haven't seen almost any other federal Labor MPs come out the way you have. Bill Shorten has made strong remarks about anti-Semitism, but not any others, as far as I'm aware anyway. Now, Scott Morrison is warning that Anthony Albanese could be taken advantage of when he visits China, that China could exploit it for propaganda purposes. Bridget, your coalition team is also demanding that Albanese make the release of detained Australian writer Yang Hyung-jun a top priority when he lands in Beijing this Saturday. Do you expect he is going to be strong and make demands of China?
Well, this is absolutely going to be a test for the Prime Minister. Is he going to continue his Whitlam-esque parade around the world and just be caught with photo shoots in front of the Forbidden Palace commemorating Gough Whitlam's visit, or is he actually going to have the tough conversations that need to be had with one of our great trading partners? And it isn't just about the release of Australian citizens, it is about their place in the world and us being able to stand up for our own sovereign right. Let's not forget why it wasn't Australia that walked away from the relationship, it was China. And so the Prime Minister has a test before him as he heads into Beijing. And is he going to stand up for our way of life, for rule of law, for human rights, and for our trading objectives? Or is he actually going to bow before President Xi and pay homage? This is the big test for PM.
Michael Danby, I find it really interesting that Albanese has refused to visit Israel. Many other world leaders have, in a show of support and solidarity. He's refused to visit Israel, but he's visiting China at a time when this so-called axis of evil, this anti-Western alliance of China, North Korea, Russia and Iran is emerging. There have been strong visits between the four of them in recent weeks, giving strategic support. You know, it's just interesting that this visit of China comes at the time when those partnerships are becoming really concerning.
Albo should understand we're on the hinge of history. We've got those countries all uniting together with a civilisational challenge to all Western countries with the raping depravity of those Hamasniks invading southern Israel. We've already bent the knee on the Port of Darwin. We've already bent the knee on withdrawing our World Trade Organisation complaints, which would have been successful. I hope we don't see any more withdrawals. President Biden warned him, trust but verify. If we ask the Chinese to come into the Trans-Pacific Partnership and not ask the Taiwanese, that's an example of us bowing to the very extensive Beijing shills that are in academia, in politics, have penetrated nearly every section of Australian society, including the business community. We're very lucky we've stood up to the extent that we have, but there's a real danger. I hope he holds up. His comments and Wong's comments to date have been okay, but this is the real test. This is where the rubber hits the road.